This is the third talk on sound poetry. Today is futurism. To include futurism in a series of micro talks on sound poetry, it could seem to some to stretch the concept a little bit. This is because although this movement was active and inventive in sound creation and linguistic experimentation at the beginning of the 20th century, the fact remains that they still use words, and the words in their poetry had meaning. However, overlooking them is not an option because their work, their poetic experimentation was concurrent, overlapped, and influenced the sound poets of the time. The year 1909 saw the publication of the first Futurist manifesto. It was published first in Italian and very soon it was published in the front cover of Le Figaro in Paris, making of its creator, Tommaso Marinetti, an instant celebrity. Some sentences of this manifesto still resonate today, such as, "A roaring automobile is more beautiful than the victory of Samothrace," or "We intend to destroy museums, galleries, libraries, academies of any kind." But even more problematic, "We intend to glorify war, the only hygiene of the world, patriotism, militarism." And this last sentence shows clearly the links between Italian futurism and Italian fascism. The futurists praise the massing, urban dynamism, the rapid pace of modernity. And nothing represents more clearly science and technology than the increasingly more visible machines, including the internal combustion engine, locomotives, ocean liners, automobiles, and aeroplanes. Futurists look to science and technology for a direction of mind, and they try to establish clear connections between their literary experimentations and the innovations in science and technology. Futurism transcended the literary field, and they cover numerous disciplines. They had manifestos on painting, sculpture, theater, music, and cuisine. Occasionally, futurist artists try to create pieces in which all these disciplines converge in search of the total work of art. Special attention can be paid to the manifesto of Le Art del Rumori, The Art of Noises, by Luigi Russolo. Luigi Russolo invented a set of instruments called intona rumori. In these instruments, they try to represent not sounds that we know, but novel sounds. The main poetic innovation of futurist poetry is called Parole in libertá, meaning words in freedom. It can be traced back to a poem called The Bombardment of Adrianopolis. The poem relates the story of the siege of Adrianopolis by the Bulgarians in the Balkan War in 1912, where Tommaso Marinetti was a war correspondent. This poem was published 2 years later in a collection called Zang Tum Tum. In this poem, Marinetti reproduces the onomatopoeic sounds of war, machine guns, cannons, bombs, and other noises. This poem embodies the traits of futurist poetry, specifically telegraphic poetry, which is described in the manifesto called The Manifesto of Futurist Literature, published in 1912. His telegraphic poetry called for conventional syntax to be banished. That implies the rejection of adjectives, adverbs, and conjunctions. Verbs should be used only in the infinitive form, punctuation was going to be replaced by mathematical symbols. The pronoun I was going to be avoided at all costs. They favored onomatopoeic sounds instead of state descriptions, and they encouraged anarchic spelling and minimalist forms. They also invited the dismantling and splicing up of words, reinforcing their centers and their endings. Marinetti proposed an economy of words, like those used by war correspondents down the telegraphic lines. The aim of Parole and libertá was manifold. On the one hand, it was a rejection of sentimental poetry and static poetry so prevalent at the time. On the other hand, futurist poetry tried to emulate the social changes brought about by science, technology, and modernity. Futurist poetry will become the idiom, the language of the new poet, the poet of the age of the telegram, aeroplane, motorcycle, and all the other inventions of the time. Marinetti set out the instructions for the futurist poet in a manifesto called Dynamic and Semiotic Declamation. It was published in 1916, but in fact it was written in 1914 when it was first put into practice in the performance of the poem Piedigrotta by Cangiulo. According to Marinetti's manifesto, the futurist poet should avoid facial expressions, electrify his voice, move like a draftsman with geometrical movements, move around the room, and use a blackboard to write on. This is an example of futurist poetry, Parole in libertà, The Bombardment of Adrianopoli by Tommaso Marinetti. Ambush of Bulgarian radio communications. Distor Turkish communications. Suki pasa Constantinople. Balloon Turkish stopped. Hate 400 meters. Tasirigrad. Discover to that. Radio. Assault against Siglogu, conceal assault. Important against Marrakech, Wake Point, Bulgarian objective. Via the Boras telegraph. War Minister informed by the Turkish embassy in Paris the Serbian army to reinforce Bulgarians in front of Adrianople, power usurped by young Turks, thieves, murderers, dismembering of Turkey, solar impassibility of Soki Pasha supplication of 3,000 starving people. Tum, Tasa, explodes assault of ovens, store empty. Prices going up by 300%. Sugar, 20 francs per kilogramo. Rice, 2 francs 50 per kilogramo. Gas, 20 francs per barrel. Salt, 18 francs per kilogramo. Of all 100, all 300, all 2,000, immediate execution, the soldiers that assaulted the tobacco cartels. Boom, bombarding. 20th of March, 25th of March, 26th of March. Boom. Hunger, desperation, terror of the Turks, retreat for the forts. Kauswa, Aigua, Bata, selling arms for the piece of bread, smashing shops, Suki, ubiquity. In summary, futurist poetry tried to emulate, to reflect a new way of life, represented by the machine, modernity, by novel systems of communication, specifically the telegraph. The linguistic experimentations and creativity and innovations brought them close to some poets of the time. However, What sets them apart is the fact that futurist poets, they still use words, and their words had meaning in their poetry.